Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. For all participants, now, inshallah, we will begin our program in like 5 minutes. I would like to welcome our speaker for today, Professor Dato Dr. Ahmad Murad Merican. Perhaps our speaker is getting ready. Inshallah, we will begin in like 5 minutes. All right. How are you, Professor?
Assalamualaikum. Thank you for the invitation. Okay.
Perhaps you would like to test your...
Is the sound okay, everyone?
Yeah.
Sound okay? Prof.
Yeah.
Prof sound. The voice.
Okay. Is my voice fine?
Audible from here.
So, Prof, can you hear?
Can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the audio is good now.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
How are you today, Prof?
Yeah, alhamdulillah. Can is my voice clear?
Yeah, alhamdulillah.
Oh,
Audible.
yeah. Thank you for the invitation.
We are very honored to have you as our guest speaker for today, as it is already the 9th session of Personal Talk
Ninth
series.
session.
Yeah.
Okay. When did this session start?
We began last March.
Last
It has
March.
become a
Okay.
monthly program. Yeah.
Okay.
And so we had different speakers from different fields, and today it's you, Britain, and inshallah, will I believe you have a lot of benefits gaining the knowledge and experience from you.
Yeah, I hope I can share a bit of what I've been doing.
Inshallah. To everyone, please get ready. Inshallah, we will begin our program in like 5 minutes. You can also share this program, the information about this program to your friends and colleagues. Perhaps they are working, but they can listen at the same time and gain the benefits, the knowledge from our speaker today, inshallah.
And who are the audience for this program?
Our audience are public. We are doing the live on YouTube as well, besides the Zoom meeting. So we open it to the public.
Open it to the public.
Students, could be anyone from the corporate as well.
Do you circulate this to the universities as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, Prof. Abdulaziz will join.
Oh, he's joining online. Oh, okay.
Prof, the name of the university in the Manila, Philippines is De La Salle, right?
De La Salle, yes.
De La Salle, okay.
De La Salle.
Just to make sure that I pronounce it properly.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, inshallah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Greetings to our Dean of IIUM Academy, Associate Professor Dr. Badri Najib Zubair, our Deputy Director of Business Development and Marketing, IIUM Academy, Dr. Rizalwati Ismail, our Honorable Guest Speaker, Professor Dato Dr. Ahmad Murad Merican. Ladies and gentlemen, our respected audience, brothers and sisters, welcome to Basirah Talk Series, a program organized by IIUM Academy of Graduate and Professional Studies. My name is Naima from IIUM Academy Events. It's a pleasure to meet all of you again for the existing participants and also the new participants of our session of Basira Talk Series. As for newcomers, welcome to our program. We conducted this talk monthly since last March, where we invite prominent speakers among the professionals and experts who will deliver topics related to their fields. Today we have participants in the Zoom meeting. I believe more are coming. And also those who are streaming live on YouTube channel, we are very happy to welcome all joiners to our talk series today. As in the previous series, we had invited Mr. Wan Abdul Rahim from PNB Berhad for the first session. And then we had Dato Muhammad Hasyuddin from Bank Islam, Dato Zaharuddin, founder of Elza Group. We also had Professor Dato Dr. Muhammad Rizal Wahidin from Academy of Sciences, Malaysia. And then we had Professor Emeritus Tan Sri Anwar Ali, Chancellor University of Cyberjaya, Mr. Ahmad Alfi Shahrin, the Shariah Director of Al-Rajhi Bank. And then we had Mr. Amir Ali, former CEO of PNB Investment Berhad. And last session was with technologist Dr. Muhammad Zahid Ismail, Executive Director of UDS Group. So if you'd like to watch all of the previous sessions, you may do so by following IIUM Academy YouTube channel and find all sessions of Basira Talk series, which we have already uploaded. For our talk today, we are very delighted to present you Professor Dato Dr. Ahmad Murad Merican, Professor of Social and Intellectual History at ISTAC-IIUM, who will discuss the title, The Merdeka of the Study of Communication and Social Sciences in Malaysia. Thank you for being with us today, Prof. And to introduce our speaker, I have the pleasure to invite IIUM Academy Deputy Director of Business Development and Marketing, Dr. Rizalawati Ismail. Over to you, Doctor.
Assalamualaikum and a very good morning to everyone. Okay, it's my pleasure to introduce you our speaker today, Professor Dato Ahmad Murad Merican, who is very well known in this, for communications, journalism, and all these Malay studies. Everyone should know who is Dato Ahmad Murad Merican. So I hope I give justice by introducing the, I have this short bio notes from Professor Dato Ahmad Murad Merican. Okay, Dato Ahmad Murad Merican is a professor of social and intellectual history, International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization, International Islamic University Malaysia, ISTAC-IIUM. He is a senior fellow at the Center for Southeast Asia Research and Hub Search, De La Salle University, Manila, the Philippines. Ahmad Murad is an advocate for the national narrative from the perspective of the Tanah Air. He views the Tanah Air as the larger geographical and historical place for the Alam Melayu. He has written some 19 books. His latest is Tanah Air, Passing Through the Malay Archipelago, is published by ISTAC-IIUM publications. His essays are published in many, in the New Straits Times, Melaka Hari Ini, and Dewan Masyarakat. So I'm not going to talk a lot, I'm sure the audience would like to hear more from our speaker today. So I welcome Dato Professor Ahmad Murad Merican. So over to you, Prof. Thank you.
Thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for the invitation for me to speak in the Basira series of talks. The topic that I have given to the organizer is the Merdeka of the Study of Communication and Social Science in Malaysia. The idea behind this topic is to deliberate on a very important state of affairs in the academic life in Malaysia, that is looking at things, looking at knowledge, looking at the corpus unproblematically. In other words, when we talk about social science, we subscribe to the corpus lock, stock, and barrel. And we talk about communication, it is the same thing too. I will move essentially in the context of social science, and I'll deliberate on the problems of social science in Malaysia, but not exhaustive to it. I'll also talk about initially on the history of the development of the disciplines, And I'll move on finally to the study of communication in Malaysia since 1971. Here, what I'm doing is to address the state of knowledge of the social sciences. We can see that the social sciences that we study produce, practice, and consume as it is, without any problems, without any handicaps, without any deficiencies to it. But the point here is that what we study should be able to tell us about ourselves. What we study should be able to utilize our society. But what's happening in Malaysia is that our social science is the social science that has been brought to us by an outside civilization, very Eurocentric in nature, and much based on the European Enlightenment. And since social science came to Malaysia, initially at the university level through University of Malaya, it was Victorian social science. It was a social science based on the study of society, the study of the image of the East, of the non-Western world, as studied during that era. And later on, it was embellished with the Euro-American structure of social science. How did this happen? And why did this happen? And why have we taken that study without changing it, without realizing that there is more than one form of knowledge? And why have not we established or delved into alternatives in the knowledge production system, alternatives in perspectives? Because if we look at the knowledge of social science, we realize that there's a problem of relevance, a problem of appropriateness, the problem of mismatch in what we study and what we are as a society. We know that the social sciences originated from Europe. We also know that Ibn Khaldun in his Muqaddimah spoke and tell us about society, and tell us about history, and tell us about the workings of the human condition, the environment, and how the environment shape and determine our behavior. Ibn Khaldun also spoke about the famous cyclical theory of history. But it is tragedy that in Malaysia, we hardly refer to Ibn Khaldun. I was talking to some of us this morning, and I was pointing out that Ibn Khaldun is not a text. It's not offered as a text or as a part of any curriculum. There is no subject on Ibn Khaldun. There is no subject in the Muqaddimah, whether in the sociology department, in anthropology, or in communication. So again, where this university is concerned, we have neglected a number of corpus which are relevant to our being, which are relevant in seeing the social sciences from a certain perspective. I'm not going to delve into what we understand or misunderstand by an Islamic perspective. This has not been resolved with regard to how we can develop knowledge from that perspective. But the point here is that we're talking about perspectives in what we study. We're talking about a corpus. We're talking about that knowledge that comes from a certain civilization will be colored by that civilization. And when we talk about social science and communication, we're talking about the conditions in Europe in the 1800s or 18th century. Europe is unique but not universal. What happened was that in Europe, in the 17th century, 16th, 17th century, there are problems in society. There are problems between science and religion. There are problems between the people and authority, the clergy, the church. Hence, there was an interest in the study of human beings. Initially, sociology was called social physics because they take sociology from the physical sciences. They take human beings as individual atoms, like in physics and in the sciences. And later, sociology came to be established, modern sociology that is, or European sociology, developed during the European Enlightenment by people like Montesquieu and Voltaire. And from there, anthropology and the various other social science. When I speak about social science, I mean the five fundamental disciplines that make up the social sciences. Of course, now we extend social science to areas like accountancy or law, but the core disciplines will be sociology, anthropology, political science, psychology, and economics. And in Malaysia, we have taken these disciplines without restructuring it. We also without restructuring the curricula, without restructuring the approach, without restructuring the research methodologies, as what we know. We critique based on the assumptions of that came out from the European Enlightenment, and we have not moved out of that. That's one of the reasons why I use the word Merdeka. We have not liberated ourselves from the corpus of social science that we inherited. We imitate what has been done in the orthodoxy of social science. There is a lot of we are dependent on ideas from our Euro-American friends. We are dependent on theories. We are dependent on assumptions. And then we are dependent on the media. We are dependent on the journals. Now we're talking about go and publish in those index journals. Hence, that culture has disadvantaged what we call homegrown or local journals. Doesn't mean that local journals or journals published or started in this country would develop a non-Eurocentric perspective. But again, it's important for us to look into local perspectives. We develop our own journals, but then we're dependent on much of the indexing, Scopus, WS, and everything. That's a sign of dependency. We're dependent on fundings. We're dependent on again, we become the object of study, and much of the areas that we want to do research are determined by a different civilization. Much of our social science is Eurocentric. We look at the world from the lens of Europe. We look at different categories of society from those lenses. We deny our own being, we deny our own agency and our cultural ethos. So this is the problem, and this is the tragedy that we are facing in Malaysia. And if we move on to communication, for example, there is over the last 50 years since the first communication program was introduced at University of Science Malaysia in 1971 and 1972 at ITM. It's been 50 years. Textbooks have not changed. We still use American textbooks. We still assume American, especially American categories of society. We still hold on and glorify public opinion, democracy. We still, and in fact, there is a lacuna in our engagement with, for example, the development of journalism in Malaysia. To us, the coming of the media and the development of newspapers and journalism came from the West, which is essentially a Eurocentric view of how we are engaged in journalism. while newspapers were invented by the West, and printing press was invented in Europe, and they were brought in to this part of the world through India and through Mexico City. We look at the Philippines in the 1500, sorry, and in Penang in 1805. The newspaper journalism itself, the contents and the narrative is not an invention of the West. They are a continuation of the development of Malay writing, a continuation of writing in the Malay tradition, a continuation of debates, a continuation of writing an essay. If we look at the time of Abdullah Munshi, for example, although many have said that Abdullah Munshi, who lived in Merdeka in the early 1800s, was a stooge of the West. He was a carrier and promoter of colonialism, and he wrote and structured his ideas, putting against Malay culture and values. Abdullah Munshi is a manifestation of how we see the continuity of writing and narration. He even used the Shair to write news. He used the essay, and this essay and the Shair is used in early Malay newspapers until World War II. So this shows how we are detached from ourselves. This shows how we are detached from our being and our existence, and putting an artificial narrative to our own invention, to our own use and consumption of journalism, for example, because we don't study journalism. There is no course on Malay journalism in any department of communication in Malaysia, including the University, International Islamic University. There is no course on the Malaysian media history. There is no course on the local journalism or journalism Bahasa Melayu. So again, we are neglecting that body of knowledge which complements and contributes, and perhaps also contradicts to mainstream knowledge. Another assumption that we make is that in the study of social science and communication, that man is rational and that reason pervades. Hence, in our projects and our research approaches, we, for example, study the workings of democracy in Malaysia and the workings of the media in terms of public opinion. But when we look into indigenous society, or when we look at the Malay society or society in the Malay archipelago, public opinion bears a different perspective. Democracy takes a different turn. We cannot fit Western democracy and Western liberal democracy into the workings of government and society in the Malay archipelago or Malay society, because we cannot assume that there is a similar rationality in Malay society as compared to the Cartesian rationality which is developed in Europe. Because in Malay society, reason and rationality is embodied in the idea of Budi. Budi means a network of intelligence that encompasses reason as well as emotion. And in Budi, which is central to the Malay psyche and Malay behavior, we have a third category of agency, that is irrationality. That one is rationality, the other is irrationality, which in the Eurocentric perspective, if one is not rational, then one is irrational. But in the Malay psyche, there's a third one which transcends both rationality and irrationality, that is irrationality. So this is not studied, and this has been marginalized and erased. Another problem is in the social sciences is the subject of migration. Migration is a new term and it has been elevated as a category in the social sciences when people talk about migrating from one place to another, from one region to another. And migration has been linked to economics, has been linked to labor in the study of sociology. But then in the Malay archipelago, there is no such thing as migration where the Malays are concerned. There is what we call merantau, rantau and berantau. No Malay has migrated from one place to another. We don't call the Malays migrating from Java to the peninsula. There is no such thing as the Malays migrating from Sumatra to the Philippines. There is what we call merantau. And because of the prevalence of knowledge in social science and sociology, the idea of merantau has been erased. The idea of merantau has been neglected and forgotten. And this has caused problems in the national narrative, because in the national narrative in Malaysia over the last few decades, it has been said or claimed by certain parties that the Malays migrated from other parts of the Malay archipelago. This is wrong. This is not a fact, and this is incorrect. The Malays move in the context of berantau. Berantau is not only moving from one place to another in the fluidity of the Malay archipelago, but also a culture and a ritual which has happened over centuries. And merantau has created the extension and the idea of the Alam Melayu. The Alam Melayu is a sociological, historical, and cultural reality. It is not a notion when I talk about Alam Melayu or the Malay world. It is real. It is a consciousness which is felt by the people indigenous to this rantau. So again, concepts of rantau, berantau are not taken into account when we talk about when we discuss this in the context of the social sciences. So again, the point here is we need to develop alternatives as to how we can understand ourselves better with regard to what we produce and what we study. I would like also to, before we move on to the actual problems in the social sciences, I would like to move some periods earlier with regard to the formation of an Orientalist mode of knowing, the formation of a Eurocentric perspective in knowing ourselves, and now, I mean, in our existence, we are white men in a brown mask. Regardless of many things that we do not realize that many of things that we study affect ourselves. In fact, we have to realize that the social sciences or social science is a mode of thought to understand modern society, and is a mode of thought that extends into academic and popular discourse. And policy discourse. So this is important for us to look into the structure and how it developed. And we have to also understand that the social sciences as the larger discipline and the 5 disciplines which are mentioned in the social sciences, which includes communication in a later phase, although communication is partly the humanities, partly social sciences, but I'm looking into both. These are studied in the universities in the academic sense in recent times, and social science or sociology or anthropology or communication does not descend from heaven. They are not immutable. They began at a certain time. They were studied as academic disciplines at a certain time and at a certain place within certain conditions. And we look at communication, for example. It was a new discipline. It is a new discipline which began after World War II. It's a product of the Second World War and a product of various developments due to the crisis of the media in the interwar years, meaning between World War I and World War II. It was also a problem of migration in Europe, when different scientists in Europe migrated across the Atlantic Ocean. And they call it the Great Migration to America. And when they migrated to America, when different peoples from different localities within Europe began to migrate in America, and they settled in different parts of America, one of which is Chicago. So in Chicago, they developed this experiment in terms of social cohesion, in terms of assimilation, in terms of integration, and this involves media and communication. That's when the classic division of the social science began to take shape. And later on, communication came into the picture, and communication began to be studied as an academic discipline in about late 1940s, 1950s, University of Illinois, and later on moving to other universities in America. In Europe, communication takes a different form, but then the communication that came to Malaysia was essentially the Euro-American type of communication. So how did this begin? Under what conditions do we study this? And before I move on to Europe, the structures and the character of European social science, I also like to touch that, to mention that the communication, when it was introduced in Malaysia in 1971-72, was introduced against the Cold War, the Cold War period in 1945 until 1990. So in 1970, it was the height of the Cold War period. And the Cold War period is where there is an ideological war between the communist and the capitalist bloc, between Russia and America. And the other thing that is part of that Cold War was the Vietnam War, which began in the 60s and ended in 1974. So during that period, in the 1960s and the early 70s, America feared that Southeast Asia, this region that we call, that the Americans call Southeast Asia, which includes Thailand, Cambodia, Malaysia, Indonesia, would fall under the communists. There was this theory called the domino theory, which says that if Vietnam were to fall under the communists, Cambodia would fall, Thailand, and then subsequently Malaysia, Indonesia, and the whole of Southeast Asia. So there was this fear that this region would be undemocratic, the exercise of freedom would disappear, and the threats to democracy and the threats to development, the threats to modernization, which is another category in the social sciences. So they introduced, one of which is they introduced the study of social science and the study of media and communication to instill the ideological ability and the orientation as a contribution to the propagation of democracy as a vanguard against the threat of communism. So this was the background in which the study of communication was introduced in the 70s and 80s. At that time, in the 70s and 80s, textbooks that we used were American textbooks, and these were actually CIA training materials. These were declassified. They were classified. These were recent declassified CIA training materials that were made into textbooks, and that were taught to us. They were taught to Malay and Malaysian students in the universities in the 1970s and 1980s. Hence, that Euro-American tradition has continued since then, and until now, the curriculum has not changed much. The syllabus still teaches on the American journalism, American media. The Euro-American perspective of looking at the world is still there. Public opinion is being taught at the expense of, for example, the history of journalism. After 50 years, it's just amazing that no community department is teaching and has a subject on the history of Malay journalism or the history of journalism in Malaysia. So how do we develop these things? How do we advance this? So this problem goes back to centuries ago. I would like to refer to what I call the Da Gama epoch, Vasco da Gama, when the Portuguese sailed from the Iberian Peninsula, and Vasco da Gama in 1498 sailed through the Atlantic, and he appeared through the back door. He broke through the back door of the Indian Ocean and destroyed, disordered the civilization along the coast of the Indian Ocean, and the impact is seen until now. So the beginnings of that knowledge, in a sense, began during that time, during that period, the period of the beginnings of colonialism. And in the beginnings of colonialism also saw the efforts by Europe to study the East, the Orient. The Orient means we go to to Europe, on top of church you can see the weather vane, and northeast and west and south, and east. So Orient means the weather vane east would always point berkiblat to Jerusalem, which represents Islam and the Arabs. So in the 1500s, the Church Council of Vienna funded studies to early European scholars to study Islam and Arabic, to gather and capture those knowledge in the Middle East, and later on to study Sanskrit. And we must bear in mind that these studies resonate earlier events. And these early events, one of which will be the Crusades. In the Crusades, in the Seventh Crusade, the Europeans lost and the Muslims won. So again, it spurred many developments, including the desire to so-called explore and discover the world, Christopher Columbus and so on. So these were the early studies made, and these studies were made in the image of themselves, the European self. And later on in Leiden and in Britain, especially Oxford and University of London, colonial officers, before they were sent to Africa, India, and to Malaya, went through courses on Malay society, about Malay culture, about this part of the world, through manuscripts and through ethnography, and they came here. So they gathered knowledge about ourselves. So the knowledge about us have been categorized by them, and one of which is called colonial knowledge. The division of, in fact, the division of the races, 3 races, for example, was categorized and documented during colonial times for the purposes of administration, for the purposes of facilitating their presence in the countries and societies that they colonized. So this began over the last 500 years. It was through colonialism, and then it was through trade, and it was through technology. What is important here is that through the introduction of education, through universities, University of Malaya, University of Singapore, University of Rangoon, these were universities that was introduced in this part of the world, so that these universities will be used to study this society in South Asia, for example. So what happened was that colonial knowledge was produced, and this also the emergence of a Eurocentric view of the world. And in the 50s, thereabouts, in the 60s, it was realized that knowledge, so the social sciences, has been European in nature. And these societies, because they got their independence as new independent nations, they realized that there is a need for an alternative knowledge system. So what emerged was different ways of looking at things. For example, indigenization of knowledge, de-Westernization of knowledge, Islamization. So these problems that was faced began to see approaches in terms of their solutions. And what we are facing in Malaysia are a number of things, one of which is the establishment of this university as an attempt to Islamize knowledge. But sad to say that over the last 50 years, there has been very little attempt, serious attempt among Malaysian academics and scholars to deliberate on the structure of the social sciences. In the 70s, there were some attempts to look into indigenizing social science and nationalizing social science and looking at history from a local perspective, but this did not take root. One of the the small effect that we have is subaltern history, which is in a way taken up by the history department at University of Science Malaysia. Otherwise, history is positivistic and Rankian approach. Where communication is concerned, there has been practically no deliberations on theorizing or looking at different assumptions in the study of communication, except for one or two deliberations early on in the early 2000s. And I came up with a book on that, on the history of the study of communication media in Malaysia from 1971 to 1990 to 2001, sorry, to 2001. And otherwise, there's a poverty discussion of theory. So what we have embraced in the social sciences and communication are a number of key ideas and categories without questioning them. One is reason. We base our structure of social science based on the primacy of reason and rationality as ways of organizing knowledge. We must remember that the social sciences is a mode of organizing modern knowledge, and this is what we have. We assume that it is based on reason and also rationality. As I've said, rationality here is based on the Cartesian rationality, and we have translated that into Minda, which perhaps may not be the appropriate translation if we mean the mind with regard to the peoples in South Asia or the Malay archipelago. And then empiricism, the idea that all knowledge and thought about natural and social world is based on empirical facts, which can be apprehended through sense organs. Again, when we talk about facts, we have to be aware that facts are invented. Facts is an invented category. Facts does not descend from heaven. Facts began to appear as a phenomenon in the social sciences in about the 16th or 17th century, during the time of the scientific revolution. And this is to justify and to give authority to a finding. So hence the word facts or fakta that we have derived appeared. And in modern social science, the categories of the prophethood, for example, or godhood, or the angels are not seen as facts. They are seen as something which is not empirical, cannot be tested, cannot be measured by using empirical data. This comes from Europe. This comes through a process or a period of time in separation of facts from values. But in our being, as a Muslim, for example, or as a Malay, do we separate the empirical that we see to prophethood, to the angelic realm, or to God? Do we say that prophecy or the prophethood is not facts or is not factual? Perhaps in the social sciences, we have to say that, because we are conformed to that, we have to conform to the ideology. So again here, over so many decades, we have not reconciled, we have not been able to reconcile human and revealed knowledge. And then the other character is science, the notion of scientific knowledge based on the experimental method, which is seen to be the key in understanding all human knowledge. Again, in our study of ourselves, one of the things that we missed out, I always advocate this, is, for example, we do not refer to the Mathnavi of Jalaluddin Rumi as science or something authoritative or key to understanding human knowledge or ourselves. Because when we look at the assumptions of social science, especially sociology and anthropology, they look at man as a social animal. Man has no soul. This is the thinking from the time of 17th century Europe. But we assume that when we study sociology and anthropology, do we believe that man has no soul? So again, soul has no place in the epistemology of social science. Because the epistemology of social science, and in our curriculum, we do not include, for example, the Mathnavi of Jalaluddin Rumi. We do not include other works that are of a spiritual and religious nature. And we look at the Mathnavi of Jalaluddin Rumi, he talks about the human being. He talks about spirituality. He talks about the soul. And the corpus that he has produced could very well be a corpus or an assumption in an alternative way of looking at social science and communication, for example. So another one is universalism, the concept that reason and science could be applied to any or every situation. There are general laws governing the universe without exception. This is, I'm giving you the thinking in European social science. Another one is progress. The idea that social and natural conditions could be improved by science and reason and could result in ever-increasing levels of happiness and well-being. Again, happiness and well-being. They talk about progress. If you refer to Auguste Comte, for example, the law of 3 stages. This is in sociology. And we have adopted that. We have adopted the idea of progress, we have adopted the idea of development, and in communication, we celebrate development communication in the 70s and 80s until now. Surprisingly, there are communication academics who talk about development communication. Development communication is passe. The decades of development, the idea of development modernization is an ideology that does not fit. Change does not fit into every society or the category of change. When the works or studies on change were done on Malay society or Malaysia in the 70s, 80s, to me, these were studies which are misfits. Because change is a word, is a term which is very much Eurocentric, Orientalist, and and modern in nature, and we subscribe to that without thinking critically. A progress is the mantra that every society in the world exists along the lines that would ultimately reach a stage where Europe is now. So the idea of progress is linear, is Aristotelian, as compared to if we look at the idea of progress from the Chaldean perspective. Again, this paradigm is being taught and celebrated. Another root paradigm, say, that is being taught in communication and in other disciplines as well is the mathematical theory of communication by Shannon and Weaver, 1948, based on the source message receiver, which is seen as a linear communication from a linear perspective, Aristotelian perspective. Whereas we look at the present moment, we look at the periods after the Cold War and after the introduction of the internet in 1996, the theory doesn't hold anymore. Of course, you can use it for other purposes, but again, we look at the proliferation of media. That there is no one source but many sources. There are many channels and there are many receivers. That mathematical theory of information and communication does not hold water. But still, many of our academics still hold on to that particular theory, which is a misfit in present conditions. And then we have the concept of individualism. The concept of the individual as a starting point for all knowledge and action, and that individual reasons cannot be subject to a higher authority. Again, this is very much a feature of the European Enlightenment, because one feature of the European Enlightenment is virulent anti-clericalism. There cannot be any higher authority. The state could be seen as the highest authority and no one else. And then there's freedom, an opposition to the early thinking at that time, an opposition to feudal and traditional constraints of belief, trade, communication, social interaction, ownership of property, and so on. Freedom is discussed as a category in social science, and in communication, we talk about freedom of the press, freedom of expression. Our assumption is based on that paradigm of freedom from the European Enlightenment. And freedom is not the same in any society, but freedom has been universalized. As I've said, the problems in Europe, the crisis in Europe has been, which are local in nature, has been universalized as a global problem. One of which is, as I've said, migration. Migration has been universalized. So when migration has been universalized as to characterize the movement of peoples from one place to another, we deny and we erase the traditional form or the indigenous form of moving, which is movement, which is merantau or merantau. And merantau, rantau and merantau should be, ought to be a sociological category, ought to be a contribution of the Malay world to the corpus of social science, which is not being done intensely. But I hope that people will pick up and the world should see that this is an indigenous contribution or endogenous contribution of so-called knowledge in this part of the world. And secularism. And ethics is most seen in terms of its virulent anti-clericalism and opposition to traditional forms of knowledge. So again, over the centuries, we see the secularization of knowledge in many ways. Although when we talk about the classical texts in economics or in sociology, some of them were written not as sociologists, or economists, but as priests. Adam Smith, when he was writing about the wealth of nations, he was writing as a priest. So Max Weber. But then we in Malaysia have not tried to revamp even the economics curriculum. Because the economics curriculum is one of the instruments that have created the present mess and the present problems, and perhaps I don't know what will be next year, because of what we churn out from the curriculum. Although we're talking about Islamic economics, but Islamic economics is still within that dominant paradigm. We have not restructured it. I have to touch this maybe 10, 20 years back. Students in America and Europe protested and called for a revision, a total revamp of the economics curriculum. But we have not done that in Malaysia. I'm not saying that we should be radical, but or rather militant, but I think we should be radical about it. Call for a change, but we have been taking it easy. You know, the ministry or the university management have always reminded us on the curriculum review. They call it curriculum review every 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, but that's not enough. It's not review that we're talking about. We're talking about a total revamp, a total reconstruction and restructuring of the social science curriculum, which includes communication as well. So this brings us to how do we break down the problem of the tragedy that we have with regard to conforming to rationality and reason. There are several. One is that we see that there is a Eurocentric bias in that ideas, models, problem selection, methodologies, techniques, and research priorities tend to originate exclusively from American, to some extent British, and to some extent French and German works. We must realize that like the global powers, there is also what some scholars have called social science superpower. And the social science superpowers are America, Britain, Germany, and France. Japan is a good funder. So, and many of us in Malaysia berkiblat to these countries with regard to ideas, models, theories, and you know, when we do theses, I see students citing theories and ideas from those societies, which may be a misfit to what they want to do. Even methodologies, for that matter. And the second is that there's a general neglect of local literary and philosophical traditions. As I've said, in Malaysia, for example, we neglect many of our scholars. I mentioned Abdullah Munshi. Abdullah Munshi is one of them. You want to study sociology, you want to study Malay sociology, you go to Abdullah Munshi. Abdullah Munshi is a precursor of indigenized sociology, although not in academic mode. You can read various books of Abdullah Munshi. Abdullah Munshi was an early sociologist, a scientist. He can be called the father of modern Malay journalism. In fact, before the introduction of Malay newspapers, I've written about that, but people don't read. The corpus Abdullah Munshi is not read in the social science department or in the media department. It may be read or introduced as text in the literature department, in the study of Malay literature. Abdullah Munshi would have been read as text, but they're not read by the people in sociology in Malaysian universities or people in communication. So we neglect people like that, and also a series of other corpus developed by Sheikh Al-Hadi, for example. You look at Al-Imam, the radical Malay newspaper, 1906 to 1908, published in Singapore. There is a whole corpus organized by Sheikh Al-Hadi on reform, Islah, and Tajdeed. and observations of Malay life, observations of local life at that time, which are ignored. Also works by Zaba, the Malay thinker who has developed the Malay language, who have made observations about Malay society in change, who has influenced the works of Engku Aziz. And again, many people do not know what Engku Aziz has written. So again, because of these things, we neglect local traditions, local intellectual traditions, and these remain objects of study, not subjects by itself. So the concepts of in social science that should be in our society, like Budi, for example, Rantau and Merantau, the idea of Malay civilization and Malay journalism is just ignored, put aside, or distorted. Okay? One case is what I'm doing now under ISTAC is to develop and redefine the idea of civilization. This is a reaction to critiques and detractors who say that the Malays have no civilization. Why do they say that the Malays have no civilization? Because they base their definition of civilization on landlocked and land-based societies. Like, for example, India and China. China has a Great Wall. Egypt has a pyramid. Europe has Greece, the Parthenon, and other things. But what do the Malays have? We don't have buildings, except for the Borobudur, for example. I mean, even that people say it's Javanese and it's Buddhist. But again, so how do we see Malay civilization? Yes, we can embrace the conventional idea of civilization. But one way to do it is to look at the maritime perspective, the oceanic and the maritime view of a people. And here we developed the concept of Tanah Air. And in the concept of Tanah Air, the notion of the Alam Melayu, we can find and we can categorize the Malay civilization. That Malay civilization is maritime, and there are many ideas and historical antecedents that we see in the Alam Melayu as the Tanah Air, where maritime civilization conjures itself. So again, this is to redefine civilization and to place and locate Malay civilization as a civilization by itself. And why, for example, Malay civilization is being looked upon condescendingly is because of, again, scholarship, historical and traditional intellectual narratives has placed the Malay in between two great traditions, as India and China. And the theory is that, this is put by one scholar, one well-known scholar, that any society or any peoples who are receivers of two great civilizations or a civilization will be stunted. There can be no development or progress, and he called it residual civilization. I take offense at that category to describe Malay civilization as residual, which is to me an insult at all levels. So that's why and we have to look into how we can counter this, and one of which is to reconstruct the narrative that tells us that the Malays have a civilization similar to other civilizations. Of course, we cannot compare in terms of many things, but we have to accept each civilization is a genius of its own. And if we look into the existence of Malay society and culture over the decades, we find that the Malays are people of multi-civilization. So there is a multiple civilization approach to the study of Malay society, because the geography and the history of the Malay archipelago has brought in peoples from other civilizations, from China, from India, from the West Asia, from the Middle East, and from Europe to converge in Malacca and various parts of the archipelago to make this society one of the most cosmopolitan societies in the world. And this has not been recognized. So again, why we do not recognize this is because of that veil that we have adopted through Eurocentric and Orientalist knowledge of ourselves. The third problem is lack of creativity or inability of our social scientists to generate original theories and methods, lack of original ideas, which denies new theoretical perspectives, schools of thought, or innovative research methods. Four is imitation of ideas, which called mimesis, uncritical adoption of the corpus. And we internalize things and we reinforce that Eurocentrism or that Orientalism in ourselves. In fact, every day we do that. Every day we reinforce these things through at the academic level as well as at the popular level. Especially when you talk about democracy and talk about freedom, we reinforce those things. When you talk about denying the cosmology and the metaphysical world, and looking into the world that has been produced by an outside civilization, in terms that we have to use the phrase that we have to develop. We have to develop. That's reinforcing an Orientalist construction. And then 5 is the European discourse on non-Western societies tend to lead to an essentialist construction of society conforming that the opposite of what Europe represented. For example, this is one of the things which I discovered. I came to history. I'm not a history graduate, but I came through history from the social sciences, where I see that part of the nation's history has been distorted, misrepresented, or underrepresented. And we look at the narratives of colonial history on Malaysia, on Penang especially. We can find words like barbaric, backward, irrational, natives, wild, and so on. These are words to describe our ancestors. And our ancestors barbaric, backward, or irrational, or a bunch of wild people. The wild, the irrational would be the West. The plunderers would be the West. Again, it's not to say that we have to look into it from an indigenous perspective. No, because the reality is that if we look at our society, we have to look at our society from an objective lens. So again, the description and the representation of our society before the colonial period has been unjust and unjustified. So again, we look at the history of Penang. Before the coming of the British would say that the peoples on the island are a bunch of natives, or band of fishermen without any laws, law of jungle, and this has to be countered. So the colonial narrative, in terms of then, or in terms of discovery, or in terms of that they came here to civilize us, would have to be countered by us. If we don't, we're not alert to the knowledge of history. If we're not alert to the essentialist construction of European history, then we will not be able to see ourselves. That itself has distorted our being. That itself, in terms of the illegal occupation of Penang, which means to say the polity has been separated from the dominant polity in the Malay archipelago, itself has distorted our history and our being. And then there's an absence of minority points of view, not only ethnic, but other disadvantaged or underprivileged groups in our society through the social sciences. Another one is that our social science that we practice and consume in Malaysia serves the state through, for example, anthropology, sociology, and through communication. For example, when you talk about national unity, okay? We use knowledge in anthropology, sociology, and communication through that, and this is fine. Okay? National integration and so on. But again, we need to look into the knowledge that we study, the corpus, the discipline as beyond the state. It does not necessarily serve the state. it does not necessarily serve any centrism, because when you look at social science and communication, that's ethnocentric. The present corpus of knowledge that we have in Malaysia is ethnocentric. By ethnocentric, I mean Eurocentric. Eurocentric is ethnocentrism. So what we're studying is an ethnocentric knowledge about ourselves, and that ethnocentric comes from the other side. But I'm not advocating that we should study knowledge that is that should come from our perspective. No, what we should advocate is a universalized, objective knowledge of the phenomenon that we face with. And then there's also what we can call academic or intellectual imperialism. This is an example of the practice and adoption of the curriculum, books, and other materials from another tradition is intellectual domination by the social science powers. And so these are some things that I think we need to look into. Our scholars must be more aggressive and must be more alert, and should have a sense of the origins of academic disciplines. And in many universities in Malaysia, and in this university, we need to approach the disciplines from the perspective of developing alternative knowledge systems, not necessarily looking at it directly from an Islamized or from an indigenized or indigenized perspective, but looking at it, what alternatives do we have with regard to, for example, the discipline of sociology or of communication, and do we want to embrace our intellectual traditions into it, or do you want to discard it, or do you want to see it in terms of the relevance of what we study to ourselves, or should we be alert to ourselves as being distant from what we study, and what we study has produced that distance of identity. So finally, I would like to take this opportunity for the universities in Malaysia to relook at the curriculum. I think this is one way in which we can address this problem. Relook, revamp, restructure the curriculum, relook at the books as texts that we offer to our students. Why should we, for example, study texts produced in America or New York and London to students in Asia or in Malaysia? Of course, it's good to know, but not good to know in terms of it as the only text. So this is a small way in which we can move forward with regard to the corpus that we have before us. Thank you. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much, Professor, for sharing all of your knowledge, experience, and views on this topic, the Merdeka of the study of communication and social science in Malaysia. We hope this talk has benefited everyone who is with us today. So for all joiners, we welcome your feedback for the improvement of our Basra Talk series. Kindly refer to our chat box where we share a link to our evaluation form. So we would really appreciate it if every single feedback from all of you can be received from us. So now I would like to open the floor for question and answer session. For Zoom participants, please get ready. If you have any question, you may unmute your mic and ask our speaker directly. And for joiners via YouTube, you may drop your questions at the chat box and we will read it out. Anybody has any question, you may unmute your mic, introduce yourself and proceed with your question.
Hello, good morning. My name is Arif. First of all, I would like to say thank you, Prof, for the enlightening talk and presentation just now. I would like to ask regarding social sciences, as somebody who studied social sciences during my undergrad studies, I'd just like to know how hard is it for us to reconcile religion and value into social study itself? Because like when we learn about social studies, humanities, we focus on the human aspect. But then how hard is it for us to reconcile it back with our values and in an academic sense with the religious part, our value part? I would just like to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, if we look at the structure of the social sciences, there is no place for religion. Structure of modern Eurocentric social science. That's why I question whether what we are studying and that the corpus is appropriate for us. In other words, if you want to know about religious life, or if you want to know about anything sacred, there is no portion of the sacred in the 5 main disciplines in the social sciences, even in history or in law or in communication, because all assume an empirical, a rational, and a factual, a European Enlightenment way of looking at things, denying the metaphysical, denying things that we cannot see. This is the result of the secularization of social science. This is also a result of the collapse of the Catholic Church. If we look at the Catholic Church, which has held sway, we're not saying that we believe in the Catholic Church, but the Catholic Church has monopolized European life for about 1,500 years, and from the European narrative, the collapse of the Catholic Church induced the emergence of a secular way of looking at things. Hence, Protestantism has created, has desacralized in a way the Bible. The Bible, after the collapse of the Catholic Church, the Bible can be translated or written in various other languages apart from Latin. Early on, it was Latin. So so again, this has created this this process of secularism and secularization of knowledge, as we can see in the social sciences. So the parameters and the substance of it do not include the sacred and religion. So in Malaysia, we are in a dilemma. We're having a problem by not realizing it, that it's a problem. If I want to study religion, if I want to study the sacred in the social science department, I cannot do that. I have to move to an Islamic studies department, and this distorts everything. So here, that's why it's important for us to recognize the sacred component in the social sciences. See, Asian societies, or we in Malaysia, our life is based on religion. Our life is based or determined by what we believe in terms of what we call our religion. But in the West, the idea of religion is different. They have thrown out the church. They don't go to church anymore. I mean, we're talking about, again, this does not mean that they don't have spirituality, but I'm talking about the idea of religion. So again, the idea of religion is thrown out, is marginalized or dissipated. So what we need to do here is to include, the sacred in the social sciences, the sacred in communication, the sacred in history. Example, when you talk about history, it's always the agency of man, cause and effect. It's all because of the actions of society or individuals. But ultimately, history depends on the creator. We're talking about secular history. The history that we have now is not secular history, but secular history. It depends on the creator. And this was said by Ibn Khaldun. If you go back to Ibn Khaldun, then we will understand what history is. We can intervene, yeah. But God gives us the ability to intervene. But ultimately, if you look at the larger tapestry of human society, the rise and fall of human society, it depends on the creator. But this has not been factored in the study of history in Malaysia. We have touched it as an anecdote, but we have not deliberated and contextualized what happened to our society with regard to what we believe in. So there is a mismatch, a contradiction in terms between the knowledge that we study, consume, and practice and the religion that we practice and internalize. And I always, that at one point I was in the, I'm sorry if I'm offend people, but I was in the UTP, University of Technology Petronas. I was housed in the Department of Humanities. And I had a good time also wrestling with my fellow engineering academics. Generally, engineers would like to think that they are linear thinkers. They believe in facts, they believe in what they see empirically. And I would ask them in a naughty way, if you do that, why do you go and pray in the mosque? You cannot prove empirically religion, you cannot prove empirically spirituality, you don't take spirituality as a fact. So again, this is where we need to reconcile. And this is the responsibility of scholars and intellectuals in the universities. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Prof, for the answer.
Thank you.
Right, thank you, Prof. And also thank you to Inshe Arif Zahran for the question. We'll still have time. We open the floor to question and answer if there is any.
Assalamualaikum. May I ask? Am I audible? Hello?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Alright, alhamdulillah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Alyssa. I'm an alumni at IIUM. And I noticed that you had mentioned that a lot of Asian cultures, rather, as a matter of fact, non-Western cultures in general, are seen as barbaric, they're framed as non-civilized. And I was wondering, seeing that Western cultures have dominated many aspects of the overall global lifestyle, such as the way we run our economies, media, and all sorts of things that influence our lives, how do you think we can translate the cultural identity of Malaysia to be more comprehensible to others so that we can prevent further mistranslations and we can, compete against this narrative that we're being seen as barbaric?
Yeah. This is a tough question. The West, since the 1700s, this is quoting outside, has always been racist. In other words, looking at making a distinction between the different races, colorism, which means to say that the criteria of the color of the skin would be the deciding factor in many of the decisions made. So how do we overcome this? Again, this is and how do we overcome to be on par with them, to get them to accept us? We have to work harder. We have to think harder. We have, in other words, if you look at the history of Japan, I'll give you an example. Japan is an Asian country, right? The history of Japan is a very interesting one. Way back in the 1800s, the Japanese have already realized that they want to be on par with the West. They do not want to be subservient with Europe. From the 16th century onwards, I've come across this, the Portuguese. They went to trade as far as Japan. They only came to Merdeka, actually. The Japanese went to Macau and they went to Japan. And they went to Kobe. They brought in silk and elephants to Kobe. I don't know whether the elephants were from Malacca or not. But the Japanese were hostile towards them. The Japanese called them Southern barbarians. So the Japanese has this actually hostile attitude to the West. And during the Tokugawa period, a number of initiatives were done. These are both state initiatives as well as academic initiatives, but supported by the state. The Japanese, they wanted to be like the West. What they did was they decided to have colonies. they decided to colonize. And it's ironic, the West colonized Asia. So who the Japanese colonize? They also want to colonize Asia, because they want to tell the West that, look, we also have the ability and the power to dominate other peoples. So what they did was to colonize Manchuria, to colonize Nanking, and finally to colonize Southeast Asia, to tell Europe that they are as capable as the European powers. But what happened, what the impetus again was the defeat of Russians in the Russo-Jap War in 1904-1905, the first time that a white power was defeated by a nation power. But at the same time, in the 1870s, 1880s, the Tokugawa shogunate required Japan to Japanese universities to establish Institute of Oriental Studies, because they want to capture knowledge about the rest of the world. So if to them, if Europe has captured knowledge of Asia, they also want to capture knowledge of Asia. They contested with Europe. So this contestation is not quite revealing, but if you look into the Japanese intellectual efforts at the time, their objective, the national ideology, was to be on par intellectually, economically, and politically. So this is what you have to do. And because of those efforts over the last more than 100 years, the Japanese now is part of the Western world. They've been accepted. So this is what Mahathir wants to do in 1981. Okay? This is what Mahathir has wanted to do in terms of his various policies, Vision 2020, in terms of developing proton. Now, many people would be against proton, but we look at history. Developing a car culture, of course. I mean, we may be against a car because they emit fossil fuels and so on. But developing a car culture is one of the routes to global power. If we look at the various Western powers, learn from history. Okay? Britain, Germany, France, America, these were car cultures. And it's not only the car, actually. We have to look beyond the motor car. Beyond the motor car is where you have, in other words, from the car, from the automobile industry, you develop innovations. You develop skills, and people don't see these things. And this is what the Japanese have done. You go to Japan, they have indigenized technology. They learn, they acquire technology as far from Holland, from the Netherlands in 1600. And in 1800, 1900, Germany was their allies. And they imported technology, and one of which is, I'm amazed at how they built the railway industry. For a small country, you have a huge railway network, and you have a huge a history of locomotive construction. You look at there's some railway museums, I think in Kobe or Osaka. Fantastic. And companies like Suzuki or Mitsubishi, these are not just companies, or GRC is what we call it, but these are indigenous companies that develop indigenous technology. So this is what we have to do. We have to follow Japan, and people don't see this policy that our fourth prime minister at the time was trying to do, and now he's jubilated. It doesn't matter, but that's what he's trying to do in terms of bringing up, elevating national capacity at global level, and thereby creating this competitiveness with the West. And what Japan has done is to challenge the West, not only creating a compatible existence, but to challenge the West technologically and militarily as well. And this is what we have to do. But they're poor in the social sciences, sorry to say. They're good in funding, they have not developed. In fact, their social sciences have been quite underdeveloped in many ways.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Alyssa. I saw that we have a question at the chat box from Encik Muhammad Shazani Masri. I will read it out. Prof, how do we address othering the other within our own Malay religion political discourse, that is our exclusivity of the Malay archipelago's Hindu-Buddhist, us as part of history of the Malay sacred cosmology, and othering of Christianity as Western religious or values?
Again, what's the beginning of the question?
How do we address othering the other in our own Malay religion political discourse?
Yeah, this is a phenomenon, I think, denying our past, which has emerged in our society, in Malaysian society. I'm not talking about those in Indonesia or others, but in Malaysian society. Two things here. Over the years, we have always been denying the Filipinos as part of us. We deny the Philippines as part of the Malay world. They are geographically part of the Malay archipelago, but they are not part of the Malay world. And the Philippines, the Filipinos, I've got many friends there, they asked me, and they told me, we are Malays. How come we are not part of you? And one of them in 2019 came to ISTAC. We had a conference on the colonialism and the Malay archipelago. He presented a paper and declared that he's Malay, but he's Christian. His name is Fernando Santiago. I don't know whether he's here or not, but I've collaborated with him. I'm a fellow at his center, but he declared he's Malay, and he represents that group of Filipinos who express themselves as Malays, and they go historically, Jose Rizal and so on, and they are the Filipinos in a way are more Malays than the Malays in Malaysia, because the first Persatuan Perhimpunan Orang-Orang Melayu was formed in the Philippines in 1928 or 1930. The earliest expression of Malay was by Jose Rizal in the 1880s, 1890s. The first country that could have used the word Malaysia was the Philippines in 1962. Before we used the word Malaysia in 1963, because there was a bill tabled in the Filipino Congress by Ahmad Alonto to rename the Philippines as Malaysia, but he died along the way, so they did not get through. So again, our stigma with the Filipinos because they're Christians, and because also that there was a clear conspiracy by the Spaniards to isolate the Malays in what we call the Philippine Islands from the rest of the archipelago. So the history behind it. And also the rejection of the Malay past. Again, it's now looking at the Filipinos as the other and looking at the Malay past as the other. This happened especially in the post-1970s and post-1980s, with the sudden new consciousness of Islam as a political force after the Iranian Revolution, 1979. And from there, various ideologies of the movement penetrated into Malay society, and this has disturbed the order of the Malay society. But yeah, it's important for us to recognize our past, and our past is, so the Hindu or the Buddhist, even the description that we're Hindus are not correct. I think we are more Buddhist than Hindus, and again, we look into what we have found out archaeologically and so on. It's not Hinduism as we understand now. It's Shivaism, the religion of Shiva, and there are many. These are different religions actually. Hinduism is a colonial construct. Hindus and Hindustan and Hindustani refer to land east of the river Indus. That's all. It does not refer to a religion. There is no Hindu religion. They are the religions of Shiva, Vishnu, and others, Durga and others, but not the Hindu religion. So again, when we talk about our past, it is the contact, and we go back 2,000 years ago, during the time of Kalinga and Ashoka, it was Buddhist. The Buddhist factor was predominant in the Malay archipelago. Palembang was the center of the study of Buddhism, where any scholars from China or they have to pass through Palembang, they have to stay there and study Buddhism for them to go to India. So again, that cosmology, that Buddhist cosmology, and this is where I think the idea of Buddhi comes in. Again, we deny that in our daily consciousness, we deny this embodiment of Buddhi in our psyche. The Malay identity is dominated by Buddhi. The highest state of the Malay is the Buddhiman. So in every Malay narrative, we find the word Buddhi. Early on, it was Buddhi, but later on in the Malay hikayat, Malay text, you have Akal Buddhi, Buddhi Pekerti, Buddhi Daya, and everything else. So Buddhi is very much structured, central to Malay identity, and Buddhi does not come from the religion of Islam. Although we're talking about the same meaning, but the principle and the philosophy is different. But Buddhi, my hypothesis, I have not come yet, it may not directly come from Buddhism, but it would be directly from Java, because we look at the Javanese narrative, you find a lot of representation and manifestation of Buddhi, and I remember in the 80s, I think there was a tiff between Malaysia and Indonesia with regard to, I don't remember, but at that time Mahathir was very aggressive, very formidable, and Indonesia was represented by Ali Alatas, the foreign minister. He mentioned one thing which I remember in the 80s, late 80s. He said that the foreign policy of Indonesia is more lebih lembut, lebih berbudi. But Budi has not been represented or narrated in the foreign policy of Malaysia. So again, you see this lacuna where we have not fallen back to our psyche. So when you talk about Budi, it's more entrenched from Java. We get our Budi, we in Malaysia, the Malays in the peninsula especially, get our Budi from Java rather than from the religion of Buddhism. So this is, I think, a lot of reconciliation have to be made, and again, the knowledge of this, where we get and how we come to terms with our being. We have not come to terms with our being as Malay and Muslims vis-a-vis, for example, the Filipinos, vis-a-vis our past and our links with India. Again, there are many stereotyping and prejudice with regard to the Malays and the Indians. The word istilah keling is one example. It's because we do not know the origins of the word keling. I've been promoting this over the years and trying to explain both to the Malays as well as to the Hindus on the significance of the word keling. But the Hindus may not take it well, and the Malays also do not take it well. But it's important to know that at one time Ashoka became Buddhist when he defeated the Empire Kalinga in India along the Coromandel coast in about the 2nd century AD. And from then onwards, the Buddhists sailed to this part of the world and established Buddhism. I would say the religion of Buddhism, but Buddhism as a belief and as a cosmology. So again, there are a number of overlapping cosmologies in the Malay archipelago that we need to reconcile. One is the Siva Buddhist, I would say, the Siva Buddhist cosmology over perhaps 1,000 years. replaced by the Persian cosmology. We are a Persian cosmopolis, not the Arab cosmopolis, but the Persian cosmopolis from the 9th century until the 15th century. And after that, we become part of the modern cosmopolis. But we have to know, both especially at the academic level, for example, we are academics, at the policy level, of how important we need to know this thing, because this affects policy. One of which is we look at our foreign policy is a bit stunted over the decades. Why? One of which is we have not internalized our psyche. One of which is we have not exported the idea of Buddhi. I know they're talking about cultural diplomacy. If we do not know our psyche, then how can we export, and how can we think of exporting anything from us? So that's how it is. I can't hear you.
Sorry for that. Thank you, Prof, for the explanation in detail. We can have one or two more questions.
Yeah.
If there is any. If not, then I'll move to the question that we received online. Prof, you spoke more about communication and sociology. What is your take on the coverage of the Malay journalism or mass publication by the historians of Tanah Melayu?
The coverage of Malay journalism?
Of the Malay journalism or mass publication by the history.
What does it mean by coverage of Malay journalism?
Coverage.
By how Malay journalism is taught in the universities, or what?
I believe the coverage refers to what we have been portraying in our.
Oh, okay. I mean, journalism in Malaysia. Malay journalism in Malaysia now.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, there is again, we need to address this state of affairs of Malay journalism in Malaysia. Nobody seems to be looking into it. When you talk about Malay journalism here, first we mean the Malay newspapers. And if we look at the Malay newspapers, there are essentially only 3 Malay newspapers in Malaysia now: Utusan Malaysia, Berita Harian, and Sinar Harian. Compared to Chinese newspapers, there are about 9 or 10 Chinese newspaper titles in Malaysia. 1 or 2 of them appear 2 issues per day, and there are about 3 or 4 Tamil newspapers in Malaysia. If you look at these newspapers alone, we'll see that the number of Malay newspapers are small in proportion to the Malay reading public. We have 70% Malays in Malaysia. We assume they all read the Malay newspapers, but there are only about 25% Chinese population, but they have 9 or 10 newspapers. So again, you see a situation which is not proportionate. And this does not augur well for the state of Malay journalism. Another one is Malay journalism, all 3 newspapers. We talk about newspapers. I know that these newspapers also have portals, digital portals. They are populist in nature. Populist in the sense that the Malay newspapers do not discuss issues, analyze, elaborate, expound ideas as compared to the non-Malay newspapers, especially the English and the Chinese newspapers. And I find that there's an intellectual problem among Malay newspapers. So again, the 3 Malay newspapers do not, or rather, it's doing a disservice to Malay readers as compared to other newspapers. That's one. Second, if we look at Malay journalism, Malay radio journalism, we know that there's RTM, there is IIUM, right? But if we look at commercial radio, which carries similar journalism, which commercial radio journalism gives value to Malay society, opens up the mind of the Malay society? None. As compared to one non-Malay radio station. And this non-Malay radio station covers things from history to music. In fact, they read history. There's an audience. They read history through a radio production, and they have an audience for that. And that's a commercial radio station. But we don't have that in the Malay commercial radio. So this shows the state of affairs that we have of Malay media producers and Malay journalists and editors. I'm sorry to say, I shouldn't be apologizing because I have been advocating for a relook, re-examine, and to re-evaluate for the advancement and the perpetuation and for the sustaining of Malay journalism in Malaysia. Because when we talk about journalism, when we talk about media, ultimately, it's Malays. 70% of the population is Malay Muslims. How come there is a contraction in how we express through journalism? And if we express in a way that does not benefit us, in other words, if there is no content that enlightens us, no proper opinion, no strong position taken, no ideas that are deliberated and discussed through journalism, no book reviews, then I think society would die, because the only window that the most Malays would have is through this Malay media. And I see it's important for somebody, for the Malay, for the community that cares, including Malay journalists, on Malay journalism to step back, look and strategize for its development and sustenance.
All right, thank you, Prof. One last question, inshallah. What is your comment on the coverage of the Malay journalism by the historians of Tanah Melayu?
Oh, historians of Tanah, you're talking about historians?
Yes.
And their study of Malay journalism. Well, yeah, in the history department, there are many ways, and historians would choose their subject matter. Okay? Not all historians would study Malay journalism. In Malaysia, there are only about 3 history departments: University Malaya, University Science Malaysia, University Kebangsaan, and also one in the University Malaysia Sabah. Each historian would have its own interest and project. I would say that the history of Malay journalism and Malay newspapers are understudied, under-examined, and there's a dearth of corpus. At one time, there was a historian at UKM who was studying on Malay journalism. And then Kuke Kim at some point began to look into Malay journalism and Malay newspapers. And also there's another historian, not a Malaysian historian, but a Scottish from New Zealand, I think, William R. Roth. He was a professor at Columbia University. He was studying Malay nationalism and Malay journalism. Also, there are hundreds of Malay newspapers before World War II, from 1870s or 1880s. Sadly to say, these newspapers are kept in the libraries and archives, sometimes hard copies, sometimes in the microfilm, but not digitized. I have to make this announcement. What I'm doing now, I am beginning a project to digitize and to transliterate the first Malay newspaper in Malaysia, which is Jari Peranakan, 1876 to 1896. There are not many, although the newspaper lasted for 20 years, but the holdings that we have in the libraries, in University Malaya, in the archives, would be from 1790s. So a number of years are missing. But in a small way, I want to develop this portal where the digitized Malay newspapers and to be transliterated would be made more accessible to students and researchers. Singapore has done that for a number of Malay newspapers in the 1930s, but yet we have many newspapers. Some newspapers, they may not be based in Singapore. They may be based in Yan, Kedah, maybe 1 or 2 newspapers. Maybe based in Kelantan, Kota Baru. Maybe based in Melaka. And some may be issued or be able to survive after 2 or 3 issues. That's all. Not even until 1 month. But these are important. Nevertheless, this reflect the thinking, the perspective, and the view of the Malays at that time. We're talking about late 1800s and the first half of 1900s.
Okay, Alhamdulillah. Thank you very much, Prof, and all who participated. We are very honored to have this discussion in depth. Inshallah, we have come to the end of our program today. So on behalf of IIUM Academy, I would like to express our appreciation to Professor Dato Dr. Ahmad Murad Merican for your precious time and willingness to be our speaker today. May Allah bless all your efforts in spreading knowledge, and may He make things easy for you in your future initiatives, inshallah. And thank you to all joiners for your support. We apologize for any shortcoming in handling this program. Inshallah, we'll meet again in the upcoming Basra Talk series, as I've mentioned that we are conducting this series monthly. Stay tuned with us as we will announce another renowned speaker next month. The poster and details will be up on our social media platforms, so follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. As for today's live session, it will be up on our official YouTube channel for your future reference. So make sure to click subscribe at IIUM Academy and also hit the notification bell to not miss any new content. We look forward to seeing you again in the next series, inshallah. Thank you very much, Prof, again. Thank you, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Alhamdulillah.
Terima kasih.